So, traditional Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. To understand atheist and agnostic as well as.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, Preston.
It's another great interview episode today. We've been doing a lot of reading in preparation for this one.
Yes, we have a fabulous author on today's episode of
The Holy Watermelon Podcast. One day we'll get
try to say it in. We always try to say it in sync, but usually we're in the same room, so it's easier. But so yes, welcome, Catherine.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
All right, so we have a little intro that I don't know. Catherine, did you write this or did you write this, Katie?
Catherine provided it.
Right.
I have a bio. Yeah.
Beautiful. Not everybody comes so prepared, but I'll give it a shot. So Catherine grew up on a secluded ranch within the Cadet Org, the Church of Scientology's Sea Org School for Children. At a young age, Catherine began to journal about her day-to-day life, capturing the thoughts and experiences of a child coming of age in a cult. Catherine's background offers the rare opportunity to tell the story of the hundreds of children who rarely saw their parents and were indoctrinated to become future Sea Org members. Catherine is no longer a Scientologist and lives in Minneapolis with her husband, happily raising 3 rambunctious boys.
So very busy.
That's me.
Busy and yeah, you got to have kids after all. That was.
Yes. Yeah. I'm living the dream, except for I didn't realize children were so hard to raise. When you're a child, you're like, I want to have kids. It sounds so magical. And then you're raising the children, you're in the thick of it. And you're like, this is great, right?
And also a little bit different of like actually raising your children instead of a ranch.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I was always told growing up, you're going to have kids and they're going to be just like you. And it sounds like you were a little bit of trouble growing up too.
Yeah. So I'm reaping what I sowed.
I loved where your book ended, but it left so much to know, and I know there's the sequel coming. So I'd love to figure out, what eventually made you leave Scientology, and maybe a little preview of the Bad Scientologist.
Yeah, I've decided I will give a little spoiler because I do think it's important for people to understand that I am not a Scientologist, and the book ends. It's a spoiler, so you could mute me if you want, if anyone listening wants to get the book. But I mean, it's obvious that I'm not in Scientology, so it's not really a spoiler in a way. But I do end the book leaving how I left the Sea Org, but there's a whole nother journey I have to take to leave Scientology. Mm-hmm. And that's what my second novel will be, because when you're in a cult, you believe everything so much, and they teach you to not look at outside information. So it's really hard to leave cults because they're literally trained to not listen to anybody else. So when I was living my best life when I had left and was living in LA, supporting myself at 17 years old, had my own apartment, out partying on the weekends. It was great. Broke all the time. So broke, but it doesn't matter. I was free, but I was still a Scientologist. And I had something happen where my brother, who's older, he had a diagnosis when he was young of aplastic anemia, and it went into remission. It came back in his 20s. So in Scientology world, if somebody's sick, somebody is made sick. So my brother was getting sick, and he was in what's called the Sea Org. The Sea Org is the people who work for the Church of Scientology, and they dedicate 1 billion years of their life. They work 12-hour days, very little pay. They're going to be there their whole lifetime. That's what I had left. And my brother was still in it. My mom and dad was still in it. I realized I didn't set this up for any of your listeners. And my sister was still in it. So my brother was getting sick. I was still considered a Scientologist. I'd go to Scientology events. I wasn't really taking any services, but I wholeheartedly believed in Scientology. And I got called into the church, and they said, "You're causing your brother to be sick." And they said, I'm basically evil. And that if I say one negative thing about Scientology, which I hadn't been, I would be what's called declared a suppressive person. And when they do that, it's like being excommunicated from the church, which is so devastating to hear. And I had to just respect that and like not talk to my mom and my dad and my sister. I was about to turn 21 and I had to hold it all into my chest. You can't complain about Scientology also to others. So I was holding all this information, and the person I was dating at the time, who was actually not my husband, grew up Christian. And so he was like, you don't seem like your normal bubbly self. Like, what's going on? And I was like, oh, no, it's fine. And meanwhile, I turned 21, no call from my parents because they can't talk to me. And then he's just like, I'm never, uh-oh. Ah,
You're still
We
with
still
us.
see and hear you.
oh, it just says you lost your network connection, but you can hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
You're coming in clear.
Okay, so we'll keep going then. So, and stop me if you have any questions. I know this is a lot to unpack, but basically, my husband said our boy at the time, I'm never going to be a Scientologist. So whatever it is, you could tell me. And hearing that gave me the freedom to talk about it, because I was like, oh, I'm not going to stop his path to join Scientology. That's literally how much I believe in Scientology. I was like, I can't tell him something bad about Scientology, because what if he wants?
Oh no.
Now we've lost her.
Now we've lost her. Yeah, we'll cut this out for YouTube. She'll come back.
Yep.
I'll just keep recording.
Yep. Video's easy enough to edit.
As is audio.
Sorry,
There she
you guys.
is. That's okay.
All right. Now we have you back.
I've never had that happen. I don't know what is my luck today. I'm sorry. And where did I end off?
That your boyfriend was never going to join Scientology, so it made you comfortable
Yeah.
talking about it.
Yeah, so that gave me like I felt comfortable enough to like I could tell him about it, because I didn't want him to not be able to join Scientology because I said something negative about it. Like, I literally thought like Scientology is the answer to everything. But when he said he wasn't going to do it, I was like, well, I could tell him about these random people that are just not like bad apples in the Church of Scientology. Like, I was still I was excusing it in my mind. But hearing myself talk about it, I think opened up like a crack in my mind. And then I started to kind of go on the internet, which you should not do if you're a Scientologist. So many stories on the internet about the truth about Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, and how he made up all these lies. And then there's all the people who were in the church who had left and all their stories. So I began to read all of that, and that's how I was able to like educate myself enough to leave. So there's a whole journey there that still, it took another couple of years, and that will be in my book, but like having, how does somebody extricate themselves from a cult without losing their family? And so that's what I did. And then I still managed to keep my family, because I just was like able to communicate to my mom, who grew up in a Pentecostal household. Like, hey, you didn't want to be a Pentecostal. You want to go learn for yourself. Let me go learn for myself. And that was something she could relate to. So she would still visit me and so on. But then my best friend was on Leah Remini's show. And I knew about it. And the fact that I knew about it, my parents cut me off, like just like that. And then I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to write this book, because I wasn't going to write it, because I was like, I need to keep my family in my life. You're not allowed to talk negative about Scientology, though. And my book isn't even negative, right, about Scientology. It's just telling a story. But they would consider it negative, because it does open a lot of eyes to the circumstance of all these children who were just shunted off from their Sea Org parents and raised as little adults and not given the proper care that you would normally give a child.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're right. It wasn't particularly negative. I mean, reading about the author and knowing about you, it's after doing that, you've left Scientology. But other than that, it's just a great memoir on what it's like growing up in. And that was the last cadet org, because they're not allowed to have children anymore. Were you kind of the last cohort of kids?
And there was like 5 cadet orgs, 2 in California, 1 in Florida, 1 in Australia, 1 in England. And like because nobody, so another thing that happened in 1985 is Sea Org members were told you can no longer have children. So there's a high abortion rate in the Sea Org. People are coerced to get rid of their babies. Some do leave, and they manage to have like a backbone, and they're like, no, I want to keep my baby. And they leave the Sea Org. You can't be in the Sea Org with a child. So because of that, like in the early 2000s, late 1990s, all of the cadet orgs started being closed, because we were 14, we're old enough, 13, we're old enough to work full-time jobs in the Sea Org now. And which is what happened to me. And for all the listeners, the Sea Org is like, you work really long days. So I was in a school and I did not live with my parents. And the school was at a boarding school called The Ranch. And I saw my parents once every few months. And I was just treated like a little soldier. And like, this is how you're going to be a Sea Org member. You're not going to be, you're going to be an astronaut. You're going to be a vet. You're going to be a musician or whatever you want to be. Like, no, you're going to be a Sea Org member. This is your purpose. And I believed in that purpose until I was actually in the Sea Org and I realized what that actually meant and how much everything is controlled. Your whole life is laid out in front of you of just working like in a cog in the machine of the Church of Scientology and not being able to have your own freedom to make choices and do anything. And the book tells of my journey of how I was able to be like, why should, like, do I want to save the world? Because that's what they think they're doing. Or do I want to just go have a life? Which is really selfish when you put it next to, do you want to save the world? And I decided to be selfish, basically.
I mean, by following the path,
now
you're
it's a
saving a
joke,
lot of
but
people from going down the road of Scientology.
People. What was that?
By following your own path, though, you're probably helping a lot more people either leave Scientology or not fall into the trap that is Scientology. So
Yeah,
helping more now than if you'd stayed at the Sea Org.
yeah, and I don't believe the Sea Org is actually saving the world. So, but at that time, I believed that, and it's a hard thing to be like told. You're like basically a loser because you don't want to help save the world. You just want to go like frolic around in the dangerous world. You know, they make the world seem so dangerous. You're gonna get on drugs. You're gonna work at Burger King flipping burgers. That was like a line they would say. Like, you're not gonna be successful. So to take that route was like now I look back, I'm like, oh, that was really brave of me. Because I also didn't have, my parents were in the Sea Org. It's not like I had a place to go. So we had to find a place for me to go, relatives that were not Scientologists. And I had to just start my life over with so yeah.
You would have made more money at Burger King though.
That's true.
Yeah, I would have made more money at Burger King than in the Sea Org, because in the Sea Org you get paid $50 a week before. I think they get like really, it's like Social Security gets taken out and like a couple other, so it's like ends up being like $38. I don't know if it's still that much, but that was in 2000. That's how much they get paid a week. Yeah, it's like a stipend because they're a religious, believe it or not, they're considered a religion, so you don't have to pay them. You don't have the same legal
obligation.
Yeah, so they get paid this very little amount, and then the Sea Org members have like medical issues, and they don't have. They're like on Medicaid. Like, the church doesn't pay for their medical stuff; they use the government to pay for it. Like, it's it's ridiculous.
So you are still an SP. The church considers you an SP. Does that mean we're SPs now too?
You are, by association, a suppressive person. Yeah.
We've done one episode on Scientology that was pretty critical. So, but I think anyone heard it. So
some of your listeners might know. But yeah, being an SP was like growing up, I was like, I would never want to be declared an SP. And like, you go on what's called an e-meter, which it looks like, picture a lie detector. And they would like be like, you just have to sit there, and they'd wait for your needle. If it turns dirty, that means you've done something naughty that week. And I'd always be like, don't rock slam, because that means you're SP. And I would like get evicted from the school. So I had these tricks where I would just like think of happy thoughts. And so I wouldn't get declared an SP. It's like, that would be the worst. You're going to lose everybody. But now here I am. I'm an SP, and it's not so bad.
I'm glad you don't think it's so bad.
Yeah,
it's a good party to be in.
It's okay to be able to not listen to people and have your own opinions.
I do have one unanswered question from reading your book about the pay. You went a really long time without getting paid. Did you get back pay when you finally started getting paid, or was it just pick up where everybody else is at?
Nope, no back pay for me. It was so unfair. Like, so all of these kids we would get $15 a week after Social Security. And I wonder what my Social Security is, how much I have. It's like $1 a week. But I stopped getting paid because my parents, because of, I don't know why, but they never registered me when I got born. So I didn't have a Social Security number. So then they stopped paying me, and all these other cadets are getting paid. So I couldn't buy like we would go to Walmart on the weekends to buy our hygiene supplies, like shampoo, conditioner, underwear, things like that. And I was not able to buy these things for myself. And then eventually, a year or two later, they finally managed to pay me I started to get paid again. And all these, and then they're like, oh, the kids who didn't get paid because they had whatever issues there were a couple other kids, but not as bad as me, who had back pay. Theirs was like $50 or something, wasn't bad. So they got it, but they're like, yours is a lot. So we're still trying to work it out. And then I just never got it. And it's like, I'm a child. I don't know how to like, advocate for myself and be like, this is unfair. But yeah, so that I'm like, I look back, I'm like, it's so unfair. And there's a point in my book where I like don't have shoes. I don't have a way to get shoes. I'm borrowing my friend's shoes. And then her mom tells her to stop lending me her shoes. And it's like, why isn't her mom like going, hey, this kid needs shoes, like somebody, or I'll buy her shoes, like looking out for me. But there was nobody doing that.
A church without a community. It's great.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so at that point, like the family dynamics within the Sea Org and Cadet Org must be very fractured if mom doesn't even see a kid in need. Like, I mean, I think anyone would see a kid in need, but to be like hypersensitized to like someone else's kid needs help and you're not going to do anything. They must really break down those family bonds then.
Yeah, they really do. And they make it so it's not important. It used to be when we were younger, they would have like a family day and we were like 3, 4, and 5. Like there's pictures of me as a baby, like on a picnic blanket. And I was like, oh, what is this? Because I don't remember it. And my mom's like, oh, that's family day. Once a year, we would all get together on family day. I was like, oh, that sounds so nice. And then they stopped doing that. I don't know why. And then we had they have Sea Org Day for the Sea Org members, but that's not for families. So the kids don't get to go to that. So it would be like Christmas. And even then, sometimes our parents would have to work on Christmas. And so it was like, we would see our parents so infrequently. It was like normalized to not see. And like there were a couple cadets who are only children. So their mom or dad would make an effort to come. But I think me being one of 4, I don't know. Most cadets did not see their parents every weekend, like once a weekend. It was like once every couple months. And then if your parent was put on what's called the RPF, which is like the punishment group, you would see them like once a year, and your parent was basically ostracized, had to wear all black, live in like a crappy dorm, eat after everybody else in the Sea Org. And I think they got like half pay. So it was like 15, same as like a cadet, but they're adults. So that's like, parents were so almost irrelevant to us. Like they're like, oh, that's my parent. Like I had love for my mom and dad, or my mom especially. I think it shows in my book, and I still do to this day, even though she doesn't talk to me. But she was just like a person. She wasn't like somebody I can like go to for anything. It was like a person I could get a hug from.
So when you leave the Sea Org, you get a bill for the things that you've theoretically consumed intellectually. Did they count what they owed you from your back pay against that?
No,
or was that?
I should have brought that up. I should have been like, oh, I have a back pay though. Take that off. But luckily I never paid it off because, it wasn't high on my priority list when I was 17, 18 in LA, 19, and I was just getting by. I could barely get gas to go to work. So I was like ramen noodles, that type of situation. No health insurance. I just like living the dream, living the American dream.
Oh boy. I don't know what my next question is. I'm curious what the transition to, and you talk about this in your book and maybe clarify for our listeners, but Sea Org versus public member. You said you didn't do a lot of services. So what did they try to do to keep you in? Did they try to bring you back to the Sea Org? I'd like to hear about that.
So the Sea Org, it's a great question. If you're in the Sea Org, your life is like all about, it's just working, go to bed, get up, repeat. And you study Scientology, like management courses or registration courses, like how to recruit people into the Scientology, things like that. So you have a period of the day we're doing Scientology studies, and then most of the day is dedicated to working, whether you're a registrar getting new people signed up or you're a course supervisor. And then, which is if you were a Scientologist, you'd be going to course. That's what they call it. So when you go in and take like a college course, you can imagine, but it's like Scientology related. So you're either doing that or you're getting auditing, and the auditors will be Sea Org members. And the auditing session will be similar to a therapy session, except for it's L. Ron Hubbard type written counseling that you follow to the letter. You cannot change anything. L. Ron Hubbard is basically considered like a god, like nothing is to be questioned. And they follow this. He has something called the bridge, and then the public are working their way up the bridge, and the bridge costs about $200,000 to $300,000 in the end. More, because then when you're up there, they have you maintain your sessions, so you audit yourself, and you get like paid. You still pay like the Sea Org. So all this money, the Scientologists are the people paying the church, the Sea Org, to get these services. So when I was in the Sea Org, I did 5 Scientology courses to join the Sea Org, and that's what they billed me for when I left, because like that's free. That's something public would pay for, even though it's not. It was training to be a Sea Org member. Just like if you joined a company, they send you to training, they pay for it, but when you leave the company, they don't tell you to pay them back, right? Like you're getting training to work for them. But in the Sea Org, there's a policy letter L. Ron Hubbard wrote called freeloaders, and he was concerned people were joining the Sea Org to get free services and leaving. So then that's his policy. And then to people who became like who trained to be an auditor, they left. Like I have cadet friends who left with 60K bills, and they were 20 years old. It's not even college though. Like it's like that's enough for, you know, at least a couple of years of a good college or like a state college, you know. So eventually there was a lot of kerfluffle when so many cadets were leaving, that anyone who was underage, they canceled. I never saw it in writing. I just heard it verbally that the debts were going to be canceled. And I was so grateful. I had only paid like $10 towards it or something, that I never paid it, because they are also, if you had paid it, too bad, so sad. Like there goes your money. But I do know, like if you're an adult and you leave the Sea Org, you have to pay that money for the courses back, and you want to get back in the good graces. So like when I was like an ex-Sea Org member, I would go to an event, like I would get like the stink eye still kind of a little bit, but I would also just like see my old cadet friends and we'd still chat and catch up. And they're like, when are you going to go back on course? I'm like, oh, whatever, someday. Even though I believe in Scientology, it also wasn't enough. Like I actually didn't want to do Scientology courses, which is like says a lot. Like that's how much, I think I was lucky that I didn't really believe in it in the end, right? Oh man. Are you guys able to still hear me?
Yeah, you're doing great.
Good.
Okay, it's doing you lost your network connection, but we'll see. Hopefully it behaves.
I have a follow-up question to that, and I guess it makes sense explaining that auditors are all Sea Org members, but of like satellite churches. So we have a Church of Scientology where we are. I can't imagine there's many members. So would they get auditing at some of the, you know, we're not in Florida or California, we're in Canada. Would they get auditing here, or if they wanted auditing, would they have to travel to Florida or California?
So
like
you could be a member. That's a good question.
What's the answer though?
Oh no.
I need to know the answer. It's just a bad day for tech.
I guess so.
Hello, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I got
All right.
hear the answer.
So there are satellite places, and then you're just a staff member, and that is still that you get a freeloader if you left, but that's only like a 5-year contract, and then you're working there, and you can be an auditor, and you could train to be an auditor. And then if you did your 5-year contract, that would be actually better if somebody wanted to be an auditor, because then you can leave and you don't have to owe any money as long as you did your 5 years, I think, something like that. But that one is like, yeah, there are smaller orgs, but you only can go to a certain level in the bridge. And then once you're at a certain point on the bridge, which is like still so much left, then you have to go to like LA or Florida, where that's like the big land bases. And they deliver those services with Sea Org members.
Okay.
So eventually you will have to pay the big bucks.
I definitely expected every contract to be a billion years.
It's so like, and if you read the contract, like people Google it, it's so dramatic. It's like, we are gonna save the world. It's like Star Wars, you know, and we totally believe it, you know.
I was listening to another podcast. I don't remember which one. unfortunately now. But they basically said like it's so ridiculous. It doesn't even like it doesn't hold up in court. Like nobody could
Mhm.
contract you even for your entire lifetime. They're like it's a ridiculous contract. So let alone $1 billion.
Yeah. There's like some couples lawsuits going on where people are now trying to sue and saying it's trafficking, you know, like trafficking bodies and using them, and especially the children that were coerced into doing it. So if that wins, it's been a lot because Scientology has so much money. They have so many lawyers. A lot of like, it's taking forever. But if that wins, that will be huge. It would be really nice if like people are starting to protest more and more out in Hollywood. There's a whole movement going on YouTube called SPTV, where people are telling their stories. And I think the more people know about this, we can get rid of that tax exempt status that they have and the religious status that they have in America, because it's like all this money that could be going towards our schools and other things. Instead, it's just being kept by the Church of Scientology, and they buy these huge buildings in major cities around the world, like the Catholic Church or something, and most of them are empty. Like most people, when they go to these satellite orgs, you don't see anybody in them, but they're huge, massive buildings. To me, I'm like, are they just trying to invest their money somewhere? You know, and they actually have. The funniest part is like they have the local people like raise the money to buy the building. Like it's still like Scientology doesn't even buy those buildings. It's in their name, but the church members are still paying for those buildings, even though Scientology has the money to buy those buildings. So I don't like, they have so much money. It's wild.
Yeah, but you can't go dipping into Big Dave's wallet. That's not okay.
No, we call him
No, he's got to
Slappy.
fly in his private jet and go hang out with Tom Cruise. I did meet Tom Cruise. That's a benefit if you're a Scientologist. I don't know.
Again, if you're a Scientologist, I can't imagine working with the man, but
No, and like the stories you hear, I'm like, oh, I believe it though, because when I was in the Sea Org, when like a high-ranking Sea Org member was coming, like you're treated like a grunt, like do this, no backflash, like which means no talking back. They have a whole language, and like I was at here's a little tidbit for you. I didn't put it in the book because my book was actually, when I wrote it, 150,000 words, and I had to shorten it down to 90,000. But one chapter was when I was called a tech page, which would sound really cool. But all I did, I was 13 years old. I would be bused down to LA, an hour bus or like a 45-minute drive. And I would have to iron shirts for like the CEO, the commanding officer of the PAC base. And I would have to like fetch her food. I was a little like grunt, but I wasn't going to school. Like they're just like, they would rotate cadets to do this for like 2 weeks at a time. And it's like, that's how they treat like anybody who's an executive. They get treated like better than most people. And then on top of that, like children were being used as like little servants. And like I don't know if you guys have seen L. Ron Hubbard Way with the bricks that are laid. It's like a really pretty street. There's all these bricks that make the street that you drive on. The cadets and the RPF, the poor souls who were put on the RPF, the Sea Org members, built that street. So it was children and then poor like slave adults enslaved making that street. Like they don't pay like outside companies to do these things. They use Sea Org members or children and to like get anything done.
That's how you save money.
Yeah, saving a lot of money. And I knew how to like renovate a dorm. I could like mud walls. I could paint. I can do all this stuff. I can't anymore. I've like lost all that. I'm like, I need to hire a handyman to come and do that stuff for me.
I mean, you put in your time. If you didn't want to do it, I wouldn't.
Yeah, I don't like, I'm not a crafty, like handsy person. And in my book, you could tell like I'm not a hard worker, like labor person. So I just
we
pay
snuck
somebody
off to hide
if I can. Yeah.
Now I'm curious, what other sorts of stuff didn't make the final cut of the book?
Well, another chapter which was like epic was I went horseback riding, and we had horses and they were like kind of trained Mustangs, which was cool. And there was DWP was behind the ranch called the Department of Water and Power. And they had all this land. So we would ride our horses, and they'd always say, don't ride your horses back. And of course, you know, we're kids. We decided to gallop back, and we were galloping, and I was on my I was on one horse that used to be, it was actually an Arabian horse, but all the other horses were Mustangs. And this Arabian horse used to be a barrel racer, so it took really sharp turns. And she took a turn so sharp that kind of bumped into the other horse next to me with my friend on it. And I fell off of my horse onto her horse on the neck, and they're still galloping. And then I fell onto the ground, and the horse jumped over me. Like I totally could have died. And I'm like, I guess it's a cool story, but didn't need to be in the book.
That's fair. That's a
That
good
is a cool
story, though.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So you talked a bit about like not going to school, that you spent 2 weeks looking after people. How hard was it to reintegrate into society? Like how bad was your education actually? How was life post growing up on a ranch?
It was my math, especially because I would avoid doing math, and there wasn't like a lot of monitoring on what you were working on because it's independent study at the ranch when we did regular school. So my math was really poor, and I was put in sophomore year because I'm an August baby, and so I could have been sophomore or junior, but based on my transcript, they put me in sophomore year. And when I went to high school, and there was a whole culture shock, which I'll talk about in my book, because I grew up around a lot of Scientology is white people. So that's what I grew up around. And then the school I went to was in Florida, and it was like Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Black people, like it was like 5% white. So it was like Save the Last Dance or something. And I made friends and everything, but it was still like, it was just like, whoa. And then like going to math class I was totally lost. I think I finished that year with like a D. It was not good, but everything else is fine. Cause like I liked history. So I did study history. I like reading. Because I read all the time, I was fine. Like English class was a piece of cake. So yeah, I think that's because I just educated myself. You know, like if I didn't like school and if I didn't like reading at the ranch, then I would have been very, like there were illiterate people at the ranch, or kids.
And I guess those illiterate kids became illiterate adults, which is a scary thought.
Yeah.
Not even being able to Google Scientology, even if they wanted to Google Scientology, they wouldn't be able to. Right?
Yeah, I think they could read. Like most ended up being able to read, but it would be like a struggle for them. So they're not going to read if it's a hard thing to do, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's a scary thought, but
yeah, like my friend who's in the book, her name's Lacey in the book. Her older brother was pretty illiterate. Like, yeah. And it's funny because like now I see him on some of the YouTube videos. He's still in the Sea Org. I'm like, poor guy. Thinks he's like, he doesn't talk to my friend anymore. Like the amount of cadet friends I have who are out of the Sea Org is like most of the parents chose to disconnect from us, which is really sad. Like for nothing. Like one friend just didn't want to she got what's called a committee of evidence because she was talking negative about Scientology, and they wanted her to do all these courses. She's like, I'm not going to. So they declared her, and then her parents stopped talking to her. So it's like, why can't she just live her life and you guys could still have her in your life? And she had kids. And then by association, my friend Lacey, she's the little sister. She's like, I'm not going to disconnect from my sister. So then she also got disconnected. That's how like much control they have over the family dynamics. And they'll even be like a married couple, and then like the husband will say something negative about Scientology, and the wife will write the husband up. And then the husband will get pulled in to get handled and like get auditing, and they have to pay for this. And then if they don't want to do it, you're going to end up, they get divorced. And then that husband's like, he gets declared, and now they can't talk to the kids. Like even like Danny Masterson, apparently he's been declared now by Scientology. And now after everything, after the ruling. And so it's like, wait, so now is his brother and sister not going to talk to him? Like, I wonder, I'm like, I want to know this. But I don't have a way of knowing that. But I'm like, I was shocked that because they were standing with him this whole way through, because they had Scientology lawyers in the courtroom with him, that they but I think now that it's going to civil court, so the woman who he, I don't know if I could say the word, but
we'll put a
I think
trigger
people
warning.
know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, trigger warning. But now they're suing him and the church Scientology because they had him, because they covered it up. Like they're telling the woman not to use the R word and so on.
That's wild. And I
Yeah.
know there were rumors that like, and I've seen sort of both sides of it, but like Nicole Kidman's not allowed to talk to her kids with Tom Cruise.
Mhm. Yeah.
She's sort
Very
of come out
too.
that we're doing what's best for the kids, but I think they're actually not allowed to talk to her.
Yeah. Like I think she's declared as oppressive. And I think Katie Holmes is probably declared as oppressive. It's kind of funny when you talk about like celebrities. It's like it's weird that like this is the life they live. Like when she did what she did, where she like kind of just disappeared and like divorced Tom Cruise, like that's called a blow. Like she did it. She blew. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so funny to see. Like she did what I did because I blew the Sea Org, and then came back. But in a police car. That's in my book. But it's like she did it, and I think her dad's a lawyer, so then he was able to like, boom, like shut it all down. But Tom Cruise does not see Surrey. I think like he just gave up full custody.
Well, I mean, probably best for Surrey.
Yeah.
And I think that's where your book is so good because the general public cares about Scientology through the lens of celebrity, through Tom Cruise and John Travolta and Danny Masterson, and celebrities already live a weird life at the best of times. So to hear like your story is very similar to Nicole Kidman's or Katie Holmes it just kind of humanizes their journeys a bit.
Yeah, and celebrities are treated really well because they're celebrities. They want to keep them promoting Scientology, but they are under the same rules and jurisdictions, or follow like what Scientology says. So like Paul Haggis, for example, his daughter came out and is gay, and then he found out San Diego church had signed like against gay rights, and he was like, oh, like reached out to like the spokesperson at the time of Scientology, Tommy Davis. He's like, hey, you guys should say a statement saying like you don't agree with that. And Tommy Davis was like, no, we're not gonna do that, because actually Hubbard does say homophobic stuff in his text. I think they've now finally removed it, but before it was normal in year 2000 that there were homophobic like slurs and like treated them badly. But then Paul Haggis was mad about it, and then he saw that Paul Haggis said on CNN or one of those big shows, Good Morning America, I think, that there is no disconnection policy in the Sea Org, like blatant lie, which is there's literally a disconnection policy called disconnection policy. And he was like, whoa, I can't believe they lie like that. So like him asking questions already like put him in a bad light. And then he went online and he was like, saw all the stuff. It's like when you go online, that's when it really happens. And even Leah Remini, right? She asked, where is Shelley Miscavige? And she got reamed for it and yelled at, sent to Flag, which is the headquarters, to do auditing that she had to pay for because she dared to ask somebody where Shelley Miscavige was. So like, even though they're like treated really well, these celebrities, they have to follow the same rules that all of the little grunts have to follow.
Right.
So like, even if Elizabeth Moss decided to leave Scientology, she has to do it so quietly because she doesn't want to lose her dad, who's a Scientologist, right? Like these, like Beck, who's no longer a Scientologist, apparently, he's now saying that. But like he probably wasn't a Scientologist like 20 years ago, but had to remain silent because he has so many family and friends. Like they all are like have this like fear, just like we do, of losing our family.
Yeah, it's a very powerful tool in cults.
Yep. Yeah.
Do you have any guesses on where Shelley is?
My guess is there's like place they have like I was at what's called the Pack Ranch, which is like the lower level Sea Org member kids, and then there was the Int Ranch, which is for the higher level Sea Org kids, and then near there was another piece of property like in Hemet, and people say they think she's there, and like she's just like okay with living out her days, making amends, because apparently what happened was she like David Miscavige like on a trip somewhere, and she decided to reorganize the org board, which is like org board is like what job each Sea Org member has. And when David Miscavige came back, he was really mad about it, and then put her he would basically put her on the RPF, but by herself, and like with some Sea Org members watching her. And like if you believe so much in Scientology, you could be like internalize everything and say, oh, it was my fault, I need to do conditions, and like just be okay with being shunted off. Like she probably is fine where she is, like, but she's not fine. Like she's under a mental prison, but she thinks she's fine. Do you know what I mean? Like my parents are okay with the fact but are they really okay? I don't think so. That they no longer talk to me and that they're missing seeing my kids grow up. Like I managed to talk to them like 6 months ago, and they were totally like happy to hear from me. And we chatted for a while. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm like, I would love to see you. And they're like, but wait, are you still connected to Miriam? That was who went on Leah Remini's show. And I'm like, but why does it matter? And then I'm like, also, I have to tell you, I have a book coming out. But so now you really won't see me. But they already weren't going to see me for something that was so minor, because I'm not willing to give up my friendship, like, because I'm not going to be controlled like that. But also, they are willing to be controlled like that. Like, they could take a stand, but they can't. Do you know what I mean? Like, they believe so much. They're like, it's set, because they also believe in reincarnation. If you have children many lives, okay, I'm not going to see my daughter this life. There's always the next one, right? Like, you could justify it. And I try to like think in their brain. I'm like, because I couldn't imagine doing that to my own kids. Because they did it to my brother too. My brother didn't even do anything. It's just, he's my brother. And he didn't even like know that it was happening. I had to tell him, I'm like, just so you know, our parents and sister, we have an older sister, are no longer talking to us. He's like, no, I don't believe you. I'm like, believe me. And then they're like ignored us at Christmas time. And then the next Christmas, and he's like, oh, I guess they're not talking to us. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like when things come to a head, there's one of two groups: people who double down on Scientology and people who stick with their friends and family. And like, people getting divorced, some couples end up leaving together because they're not willing to lose their spouse, or they get divorced.
Yeah. And I would say it's more rare for them to choose their spouse, like or their baby. Like, if they're going to have an abortion or not, generally they stay and they have the abortion. Like, they believe in it so much. And I think for myself, because I grew up the way I was, where I was already questioning things all the time and I was curious, that I never really fully bought it. Even though I bought it, like, I still was a full Scientologist. Like, it was easier for me to extricate myself because I think people bought it even more than I did.
Yeah. I mean, when it's the only story you're told.
Yes.
Whether Santa Claus or Jesus or Xenu.
Yeah.
That's the only story then you buy into it. But to have that curiosity is really good.
And I think luckily I had that personality. I think it's just a personality trait that I had. And so that like pushed through, and it was never able to be suppressed by Scientology or the Sea Org. I'm like grateful for it now. I'm like, wow. I'm like so glad I was such a annoying teenager. Annoying everybody. I wasn't even bad though, right? Like, I was just like a teenager, but in a very controlled environment, which is why they would be upset. Like, they don't want me to be loud. They don't want to be wrestling with boys in the hallway. Not like naked or anything, but like being silly with boys, flirting with boys. And that's like was my main concern at 15 years old, was boys and having fun and realizing the Sea Org is not fun.
I mean, yeah, I don't blame you.
Yeah. And honestly, there were following when I left, because I was one of the first. It was like one other cadet before me, like for my age group, like over that year, like they started trickling out. And by the time I got back to LA when I was 17, there was like 20 of us all living in LA who didn't have parents, and we were just like hanging out, and it was really fun. But also like we're all just like doing our best. And I'd say it was fun because we had so much freedom, like we never experienced that before, to have our nights and weekends to ourselves, to do whatever we wanted.
That's a lot of fun. And those are the ranchers you dedicated your book to, I presume.
Yeah. And we have like that, our sense of humor and like how we talk. Yeah, exactly. Dedicated to them. And I have some girlfriends. So on my Instagram page, people can scroll through at the Bad Cadet, and you could see photos from the ranch and the people. And then you could see the people who I still hang out with to this day, and that we're really close. Like, we see each other every year. So as bad as like my childhood technically was, I also got a lot of good out of it because of how little we were supervised. We were so close, like me and my girlfriends. And even the guys, like when I see the guys, like it's like brother sister camaraderie. Like, we joke around and like, so that part is something special. So I'm like, okay, like I could take some of the good from that too,
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us about your work in the Sea Org, specifically around trying to bring back wayward Scientologists?
Yeah. Well, like I was my first job, my post is what it's called. I was 15 years old. My title was rudiments registrar, and I would have to call disaffected Scientologists or people who hadn't been in services and try to persuade them to come in. And then sometimes they'd send us out in a car to their house and like it's unannounced and try to like convince them to come in. But the amount of people I would call who would scream at me and hang up on me because they're basically being harassed and stalked. And I was only 15. And I'm like, why do so many people hate Scientology? I'm like, red flag. So that was my first job. And so like, for anybody when they're like start to slowly leave, either they're smart about it and they don't tell people so that they could just slowly leave and exit. Or if they do tell people, then they're going to get pulled in and get auditing, and you might get re-indoctrinated from that auditing. And then you're just kind of back in again. So people do have doubts sometimes, even for the Sea Org, they want to leave. And then I show that in my book, and then they change their mind because they get auditing and they go back in the Sea Org and they stay on post. That one friend of mine towards the end of my book who decides to rejoin the Sea Org, two of them rejoin the Sea Org, they ended up leaving eventually. So yay.
That is good news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a quick anecdote. When I did my first year of religious studies in university, one of our assignments was to go to a service that wasn't one that we belonged to. And my teacher was like, do not go to Scientology. He's like, they will never stop calling you. He's like, go pick any other one. He's like, they will harass you forever if you go to Scientology.
And you'll get their mail forever.
Yeah. So
yeah. They keep all the records.
Yeah, I saw a letter posted to Reddit just a couple of days ago, actually, after I'd read your book, but while planning for this, that a guy had bought a copy of Dianetics back in 1990, and then the church never heard from him again. And he got a letter just before Christmas, like weeks ago, saying, hey, you bought a book in 1990. Do you want to talk about it?
No.
He was like, wow, I still have my information. Yep,
Yeah.
It's in the central files. I'm sure it's all been scanned now. Back then it was paper, but yeah, that's also one of my jobs when I was in the Sea Org, was working in the central files and getting all the addresses and stuff. My mom was a letter registrar, and she would write letters to people inviting them to come out to the church. That was all she did all day. How boring is that? To write letters nonstop. Like that's like most jobs are like, there's several different things happening. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
and
tough.
I mean, Scientology isn't a big organization. When we did our episode, the numbers were like 60,000 wide. Like it's not a huge group of people. So to keep Sea Org members busy, and yeah, there's probably a lot more Sea Org members than there is jobs for them, but there's also the cult tactic of keeping them mindlessly busy.
Yeah, they definitely keep them mindlessly busy. Like I don't know what's happening. I think that was one of your questions. Like, I feel like there's no way they're getting new members, but yet somehow they're still existing. And like, especially if you watch like on TikTok, there's like all these people now protesting at all the testing centers. That's where they try to recruit new people. And they're like, it's a cult, don't go in there. It's like, but it's all over like the news, just like the negative aspects of Scientology. So I'm like, and then the Sea Org members can't have kids. Now Scientologists could still have kids. So there is still those younger kids growing up in it. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm very curious. I do feel like I don't know what's going to happen.
Especially after so very committed members aren't having kids. There's a lot of bad press, but I also wonder what happens after David Miscavige and Tom Cruise are no longer, once they pass away. Because L. Ron Hubbard didn't have a succession plan, which is how David Miscavige got in there. And then Tom being the right-hand man and a celebrity. Like there's no, I don't know, I feel like there's no even draw after that.
It would be like, so he has such a monopoly, and like he's made it so it's a dictatorship. It would be amazing if he just like stepped down, if he got sued and had to go to jail for something, and then it could be like a board of directors, and then it might calm down. Like honestly, even though I believe all the stuff that Scientology does, most of it is bullshit. There is some helpful self-help stuff at the beginning of joining Scientology, which is what draws people in, like how to communicate or how to have a better marriage. Like L. Ron Hubbard just pulled from different like psychology and like Buddhism and things like that about how to be, it's like self-help at the beginning of Scientology, but then after that, most of it's crap, right? And like, but if people like that crap and they feel good about it, fine, I don't really care. But stop this like family control of like breaking up families, controlling how people think. Like I would, if a different group of people took over Scientology and they were more lenient about it and like chill, and they didn't have a tax exempt status too, it was more of like a corporate self-help group, cool. Like that's fine. Like that's what you are then. But like, and like that you're being more honest and transparent. But to be a church when it's not really a church, there's no deity, there's no God, and it's, you have to follow all these rules or you get excommunicated, and then they don't pay any tax dollars on top of it, and it costs a lot of money. That's the part that really like ticks me off. You know, they have money for lawyers, right? And they sue the crap out of everybody.
Wait, so you're telling me Earth isn't the prison planet?
No. And that's like the funniest part too, is like that would suck. Like if you get all the way to OT3, which is what you find out about the aliens. Remember, like guys listening, like if you're paying all this money and now everybody you know around you is a Scientologist and you're so in that life, and then you find out about the aliens, you gotta accept it at that point, right? You're kind of screwed otherwise. So it's like,
I mean, I've heard
my dad is on OT3. Well, it's okay. I was just gonna say my dad's on OT3 and he's never moved past it because I think he's probably like, oh God, now what else is out after that? That's my theory. He wouldn't agree to that, but yeah.
And I've heard some prominent Scientologists. I forget one. He was like David Miscavige's right-hand man. And then I think even Leah Remini said, like, when they hit OT3, they were kind of like, what the fuck is this? And a bit disillusioning when you hear about Xenu and the prison planet. But
yeah,
It's
and
like
Paul Haggis
Patreon
talked
lock
about it too.
sci-fi.
Yeah. And now you have to believe it. And then when you get to the higher levels, they believe that like some of the aliens implanted in you. So then you have to get rid of the aliens by you audit yourself, which would like you like tell these, I don't know what the process is, but you're telling these aliens to get off your body. But wouldn't that make you kind of like like, you know, like go a little psychotic if you think things are living inside you? Like I feel like that process would be not good.
actually, here's a good question. It's not on our list, and we've talked about this before. Do you think David Miscavige and Tom Cruise believe it, or does Scientology just give them power?
I actually think that for sure. I think Tom Cruise for sure believes it. Like you see it in his face, right? It's like, like he's so into it. David Miscavige, I don't know. Sorry, I had to plug in my laptop, but I'm still talking. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like he uses it for his own advantages. But I think he does believe it. I don't know. And I don't know, like L. Ron Hubbard, I think he did try to make money, but I think he also believed it himself. Like he thought he was a genius and had the right to make up all this stuff. And like, you know, like he's a narcissist or like somebody who's like, oh, I'm helping everybody by making them pay all this money. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, I believe that L. Ron Hubbard was a narcissist for sure.
It's pretty easy to believe. I'm on board.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I hope you can still hear me. Sorry about that.
Yep,
Yeah.
you're great.
I'm here though. Okay. And I know I'm frozen. Is it frozen for you guys?
Nope.
We're good.
We got good internet
Oh.
up in Canada, apparently.
I know, and I normally do too. This is a weird day.
That's fine. Like I said, I had tech issues getting on here today, so it's just probably the Thetans are probably interfering with this interview.
The Thetans are coming. They're surrounding me.
We're doing this to ourselves, that's for sure. That's one thing.
It's what we
have
get for
learned.
being
It's our own
suppressive.
fault for
Yeah.
We're suppressing the internet.
So after leaving the Sea Org and then subsequently leaving Scientology altogether, what does spirituality look like for you?
It's challenging, like, to believe anything anymore. So my kids do go to choir at a liberal Christian church just down the street from our house. We walk to it, and it's a good church. I like what they say in the sermons. So I only go to the church itself when the boys are singing in choir, when any of the boys are. But I personally have a hard time, like, when I hear "we are all sinners," when they say that part in church, I'm like, I don't like that. And my husband's like, I think it's more along the lines of, like, we make mistakes, like, God will forgive you. I'm like, well, that's nicer. Can you make sure our boys know that? you know? I hope I didn't offend any Christian listeners. It's hard for me to, like, I didn't grow up with Jesus and God and all of that. So, but I want my kids I do want them to have, like, a sense of morality and, like, a community, and where people talk about being kind to each other. So I do think there's good in being in a church community that's, like, not a controlling church, which is what we have.
Yeah, that's
I hope that answers. Yeah. If they started controlling things, I'll be like, oh, I'm out.
You probably have a pretty sensitive radar for that.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm just looking at our list of questions. Have you ever reconnected with your sister? You mentioned her twice, that you got to see her in passing in your book. You ever get more than that?
Well, she was in the Sea Org at the same time as me, so we would just pass each other in the hallway and say hello. And then Christmas Day was always just like, we'd all open presents together, like somewhere random, like on the sidewalk on a bench, because we don't have, like, a house. And you can't go in each other's dorms. Sometimes we go in my parents' room, but it's tiny. And then we would go out to eat, like, at the Glendale Galleria in Glendale, and then go to a movie. Like, that was, like, our family day. And she would be there. And then once I left the Sea Org, my sister would come visit once a year, which was really nice. And that was actually where we really got to know each other. And my mom and dad would come. And when I had twins 7 years ago, and they came for, like, 2 weeks, which is, like, crazy long for a Sea Org member. So it was like a week and a half at least. I had to beg them to do it because I had read all these. I was, like, intimidated about having twins, and I had a 3-year-old. And I was like, everybody says parents help out. You need to come. And I was able to, like, put, like, it looks bad if you don't come. It looks bad on the church. So then I think they wanted to come, but also it's hard to leave. But if they write their what's called a CSW, which is a request, in a way that's, like, sent the Catherine's family won't understand if we don't come. So we need to come so it looks like we care, basically. So that was how I got them to come. But it did mean a lot to me, and it was really sweet. And that was the last time I got to see them. And I didn't know that, because then by the following fall was when the fallout came from Leah Remini's show. And then they stopped talking to me, and my sister too. And I'd always hoped, I'm like, my parents won't be those parents. Like, I hope that they'll, like, I don't know. What was I thinking? I was naive. But then they did it. They pulled the plug, and that was a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
Your sister was promoted very quickly, I guess. Like, in your book, you talk about she was above your parents. What would have caused that? And that just feels really icky to me.
Yeah, I was worried for her when I read that.
I was worried for her safety.
I never even thought of it that way. But there is a thing with the Commodore Messenger's office, which is called CMO, where they like young children to be in charge of adults. It's super weird. It's like all of CMO is young, most of them pretty girls and pretty boys too, or attractive boys. And it's, like, modeled after, because L. Ron Hubbard, when he was on the Sea Org, it was named the Sea Org because that used to be on a ship, because they would avoid he didn't want to be taxed. It all comes down to money. So he was out on an ocean, and he had CMO Commodore messengers, and they were all children. It was Sea Org members' kids, like cadets, and they were called the Commodore messengers. And they would fetch him things, do all these things for him. And then they were kind of like middle management still, even though they were children. So then in the sea, like when it moved to land, I think that tradition just continued, and they always just have young young girls and boys 13, 14, 15 who are bossing around, or what, they go around and they check on progress reports and check on how everybody's doing and make sure they're all following their targets. And so my sister was there for a while, but it is interesting because then when she was older, 21, 22, she left. I wonder if they age out. They don't say that, but I'm like, because now she just works in the production part of the Sea Org where they make all the books called Bridge Publications. So she's like doing that.
And she has 13-year-olds checking in on her.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's freaking weird, Elron.
It's
Yeah,
better than
it
I
is
thought it
weird.
was.
Yeah, and it's funny that you said that because I never really considered the fact that I'm like, was it an ageist thing? Like they liked them to be young. And then I'm just realizing like, and then when she got old as in like early 20s, all of a sudden she's put in a different org. It's so weird.
I mean, there's a policy for it somewhere written down, but
Yeah, there are like hidden policies apparently that some people don't read. I mean, which makes sense just because like half of the bridge is secret. That's what people don't understand is like people in Scientology and the Sea Org don't know about the aliens. Like my mom is not at that level, so she doesn't know about the aliens. Like my dad won't tell her because she's not ready to know. You know?
right, because it'll melt your brain if you find out.
And you could
Yeah.
die.
You could die.
You could die. You could break your
Sorry,
back and die.
we had to put a death warning on this episode, including a trigger warning.
Yeah.
You're going to hear what OT is. It might melt your brain.
Exactly. You should put that disclaimer. That would get some listeners. They'd be like, what is it? I want to melt my brain.
My brain melted.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how far along on this bridge did you get, Catherine?
Nowhere.
Okay.
I'm on the bridge to nowhere. Yeah, because I was too busy like not going on course. And even then, because they were doing Sea Org courses, so I was just doing more training. Like a lot of Sea Org members are not high up the bridge. They're all low down because they're using the auditors to audit paying public. Why would they audit you? Like, why would they only do auditing if they're like, call them PTS when they have a suppressive person making them PTS like that. Then they'll do audit as Sea Org member, but they don't really provide auditing for Sea Org members.
And I mean, you even mentioned in your book, your parents bought you some auditing because you were just the worst, apparently.
Yeah.
And then they had to pool money together with your brother. So like Sea Org members don't even make enough money to pay for auditing.
Yeah. And technically the auditing should be provided by the Sea Org. And yet there they are paying. And like the same thing, like they would have new releases all the time. And it's called like they had like books will come out and my mom will buy them. I'm like, why? Like you have them in the library at the org. She's like, I just want to have my own copy. But it's like this, like, I don't know. They like enjoy putting their money back into the church or into the org. It's very strange.
How you identify the real believers.
Exactly. Like they're like, we're showing how much I care.
But I mean, unless you're rebellious, I don't think anyone cares how much you care.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like
Yeah.
it sounds like the most devoted members get completely ignored.
Yeah. Yeah. But like, even like how there's definitely a money element. Like the more money you make and give to Scientology, the more you're revered. So like, I definitely was like, when I leave the Sea Org, I'm going to make all this money and like give it back to the church and like donate it all so that people are nice to me. So like Tom Cruise is revered. Like even though he probably has no restrictions because he's best friends with David Miscavige. Like David Miscavige was his best man. So he's living his best life. He's basically gets to live like a god, right? Like you're already, when you're a movie star, everything's done for you, but you do have some accountability. Like you got to treat your employees hopefully halfway decent. Like in his case, there's no accountability because most of them are all Sea Org members or Scientologists who are all like, you have to just like say yes, yes, yes. There is no for Tom Cruise, you know? Which is a scary thought for like somebody to like live that way.
Yeah, everyone needs to be told no.
Yeah, I doubt he's ever told no.
Yeah, I can't imagine who would be that brave.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe a director.
Yeah.
Do it again, Tom. That's probably as close to a no as they get. But
Well, see, Tom's the
Yeah.
producer in most of his movies too.
I guess so now.
And
Yeah, he's that
producers
far
have
along.
authority over directors too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, good point. I haven't even watched the most recent Mission Impossible out of like just like I was like, I'm not gonna watch this movie.
I don't disagree with you. I don't think we should give him
Yeah.
any more attention than he already gets.
If you're curious, pirate the movie. That way he doesn't get any financial credit for it.
Yeah. Well, now it's on Paramount Plus, so I'm like, maybe I'll watch it, but if like if my kids want to, you know. But like, yeah, I wasn't gonna go to the theater. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Right.
And same with like Elizabeth Moss. I'm like, I did end up watching the Handmaid's Tale, but how much of a contradiction is that too? Like she's
Right.
in a show that's very similar to Scientology, except for like having the the part where you have to I'm trying to use the word procreate, like all the women have to procreate, right? But the same idea of the cult part is very similar to the Sea Org.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's just like da da da.
What do you think the chances are she sees the irony?
I don't think she does. I think she's just like, that's so different. And also she's not in the Sea Org. So I think if you're a Scientologist, it's easier too in a lot of ways. So you could be blind to a lot of things. And especially, yeah.
Yeah, I think
if you're in the Sea Org, it's a lot more intense. Yeah.
Yes, so tell me if I'm wrong, Catherine, but I think public members probably don't see a lot of the abuses that go on behind the scenes. I know a lady we met locally in the business community here, and she said she was a Scientologist, and I'm like, clearly you haven't done any Googling, but like, if all you do is go to the Church of Scientology building and do some courses, then yeah, it probably doesn't seem that bad.
And you get told. Sorry, what was that?
Go ahead. Finish what you were saying, and then I'll ask my question.
I was gonna say, like, and every Scientologist is told to not listen to the people on the internet, and they're all liars. Media's a liar. So, like, they're like, oh, whatever. They just ignore it. Just like even like people now, right? If you believe in a certain political candidate, you don't care about all the other negative stuff people say. They're like, those are all lies, right? Like people are very easily persuaded to not look at both sides.
Yeah. But what does the promotion for the Sea Org look like to the public church? Is there any praise for the organization? Any push to get people to join it?
Yeah, and they tend to target the younger kids, so like 16, 17. I think I don't know if it's true or not. I heard that they switched it to just 18-year-olds, but I don't know if that's true. But it's easier to persuade somebody who's really young, so 18, 19, 20, who they don't even have their brain fully developed, to make these like lifelong choices, especially if they're a little lost, and then be like, hey, like here's something that's really worth fighting for. You're gonna save the world, you have a good purpose. And if they're like just kind of floating, it's like, oh, that's great. Like now this is all taken care of for me. You can make my choices. I'm going to be saving the world. This is an easier way to live for me. And it might stay forever, or eventually they might be like, oh God, no, what did I set myself up for? And it's easier for a Scientologist to leave the Sea Org. It's still hard. Like you have to get a confessional called a sec check and leave. But if you are back in the day, like the cadets, it was harder for us because they didn't want to create it's like a issue to find a place for us to stay. Where are we going to go? So they would take forever to let us leave the Sea Org.
Yeah, because childcare.
Right.
You're 15, you can't live on your own yet.
Right.
Not that you weren't already looking after yourselves, but
yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, people are like, I can't believe you grew up like that. I'm like, I know, but it's like, I'm fine. I don't know. Like, it's just like, I get that it is all very strange and weird, but I'm like, I turned out okay. Like,
and
I don't hold
your
like,
normal.
Yeah.
Right? It's your normal. You didn't know anything.
And I think writing the book or processing it and thinking about it, like, I just don't hold a lot of like anger about it. And yeah, it was my normal at the time. I didn't know anything different.
So the next book, The Bad Scientologist, basically a sequel to The Bad Cadet, is it going to follow the same memoir format?
Yeah, it'll follow the same memoir format. And
Awesome.
yeah, hopefully next couple years here. I know it's a while down the road, but yeah, it takes a while to write a book.
That it does.
Well, we'd
Yeah.
love to have you back on when that time comes. Do you want to
Yes, absolutely.
promote your existing book a little bit?
Sure. Well, if anybody's interested, it looks like this if this goes on YouTube. I don't know if my video is even working on your end, but on my end, I'm frozen. Okay. And I have an Audible version of it coming out. Hopefully it's submitted for approval. So hopefully in the next week or so. So if anybody just likes to listen to books, I'm the one narrating. So that's, if you didn't find my voice too annoying today, that's an option as well. And then I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook at The Bad Cadet. If you want to reach out in my DMs, I do chat with people if they have more questions. I have a YouTube channel that I have not done much with. I have like 2 videos on there. If you're a YouTube person, called, I think it's under also The Bad Cadet or Katherine Spallino.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Thanks for interviewing with me.
Absolutely. This was
Very
super
happy to have you join.
informative.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm really glad. I hope that people are getting an idea of what it's like in the Sea Org and Scientology.
Bad.
Right.
That's the short answer.
Yeah.
Preston, do you want to do all of our promo?
Yeah, we've got Facebook and Instagram. We're going to have all the links in the show notes, not just for ourselves, but also for Katherine and the Bad Cadet. We're on YouTube, and we've got our Patreon, where we hope to get a little bit of money from those people who are interested in getting a little bit more from us. And of course, we've got merch. I'm repping my shirt. Peace be with you. What else am I forgetting? Discord, great for conversations.
If you donate to our Patreon, you'll get to go up the bridge of the Holy Watermelon. This episode only.
Nice.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone.
Peace be with you.
Enlightenment and salvation period. By the late Middle Ages, the Christian prophecy had fulfilled itself. God is near.